Well, good evening. Yeah, it's the funniest thing. I just set my sound volume and I lost it again. Let's get this going here. There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and last I checked, this is the Talamanca Review. It's 6:14 p.m. on Tuesday, February 3rd. Um, I'll just ease into the podcast, I guess, as I always do. I like to talk about random stuff for just a few minutes, 10 minutes maybe, depends. And then in that time in front of the camera and in front of the microphone, the podcast just sort of comes in on its own. I don't know how to explain that phenomenon. I truly don't. Um, so still busy at the books, and I mean the books are selling very well. I hope you're enjoying them. Don't forget to put reviews up on Amazon after you're done. Um, I'm finishing up a book on Mark Passio now, and that's going to be a good one too. It's very fun to do this. I mean, you can do so many things. You can set the tone of the prose. You can write in the third person, like a critical essay, which is what I favor now, like the essential Alan Watt, the Canadian Alan Watt. And I've heard from a couple of you who've bought that book and you're really enjoying it. So, what you'll notice as you read through these books is everything lines up. And I've said that before, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it is kind of astounding how they're all basically saying the same thing. And it's not an operation. They're not agents. They're not doing revelation of the method. They were just the best of us who sort of caught on to this stuff, which should tell you something about our so-called spiritual leaders, because we don't hear any of this from them, with the exception of perhaps the excommunicated Cardinal Vigano in the Catholic Church. And there may be a spiritual or a civic or a civil reason why they don't do this, why they don't talk about this extreme negativity coming from human beings. Maybe they knew what I didn't know, you know, which is that very few people are going to believe it out of the gate. I feel that the world is just coming to catch up with me now with the energy I released in The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, which, as I've said before, I consider to be an inoculation in these times, which is a little bit of a disease to build up your spiritual immune system. And those of you who have been working in this model and heeding my counsel are probably in a much better position. I sit here in the mountains wondering sometimes how this stuff hits people. By the way, I don't talk about this with anybody. With my son, I started explaining this stuff to my son in like 2008 when he was about 9 years old. Not the gory details, but just that, plans were in motion to destroy Western civilization. I saw it years ago, years ago. And so he's all up to speed. He's read all my books, so nothing is really shocking him that's coming out in the Epstein download. I'm happy about that. But I sometimes wonder how this hits normal people. I mean, they must think it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie or something, you know? They must just think it's some kind of fiction, I don't know. How would you, if you had no awareness of the level of depravity people were capable of, especially within this cult, and especially being ancillary to the cult through blackmail, how would you digest this stuff? How would you rationalize it? How would you explain it to yourself? Why are people doing this? And now the whole thing's broken open now. Okay, and there's so many things to talk about. So the first thing I want to talk about is based on a comment I got. Um, and this one is from Brent Birchwhistle. I don't think that's his real name. How do you recommend we behave about the somebody that hates us? What happens if we love it anyway? Poorly worded, but I think I know what you mean. Pipsqueaker commented, such wanton destruction, it's hard to fathom. Yeah, and these are comments on how dark it really is. Yesterday's podcast. I agree. It is hard to fathom, and the first few times you hear it, you don't want to believe it. And then if you're meant to be part of the light force that is going to help people get through this, then what I call spirit, which is the guiding force of the creator, which is, inside of us we have thoughts and feelings, but our thoughts and feelings are the divine energy shaped into our own personality. The spirit itself is just that energy, independent of anything we imprint on it. And it's a tremendous guide for the spiritual liver. So, and it's something you come into contact with through meditation. It'll guide you through your whole life. It'll guide you right back to the creator if you're persistent enough. And so the question becomes, how do we deal with this? Now, I did deal with this. So again, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of repeating myself a lot. But every time it comes out differently, and sometimes people need to hear the same thing 3, 4, 5 times in different sentences. And then one of them is just kind of magically unlocks their perception and they get it. Sometimes you say something to people, they hear the words, they understand the words. That's a verb, that's an article, that's the subject of the verb, that's the object of the verb. I get the English you're speaking, Bruce. It's not complicated. You're speaking at a very clear grade 8 level of English. I just can't get the overall meaning of what you're saying. And so in those instances, patience, compassion, and repetition are necessary. So probably my best podcast on this topic is some time ago, way before it was out in the public the way it's out in the public now, with the release of the Epstein material, or a portion of it. I think it's even darker than that. And that podcast was called Temple Whores and Noahide Law. And you can find it on YouTube. I think that Substack limits the amount of weeks you can go backward unless you're a subscriber. But it doesn't matter. It's all on YouTube. For those of you who do subscribe, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I would do this with no paid subscribers. I would do it as a form of Siva, which is service to spirit, service to humanity. I would do it in the spirit of truth, and I would do it in the spirit of journalism, what I call multidimensional journalism. But that said, I really do appreciate the subscriptions. Every little bit of money helps up here. I'm not a wealthy man. I live a very comfortable life. My life is comfortable. My bed is comfortable. My furniture is comfortable. I have all the amenities. I have Starlink. I have a nice television to watch movies on. I have a nice office here to work in. I can buy everything my wife needs. I can even take care of Stephen into a certain degree, and vice versa. He helps me. And, but every little bit helps, okay? So thank you very much. Same to those of you who buy the books. I appreciate it immensely. Last month was a really good month for books. Jordan Maxwell is really popular. Please throw some reviews up on Amazon. The Mark Passio book is really good too. I have created the definitive library of counterculture, multidimensional counterculture rhetoric in existence. Nobody comes close. There's publishers out there like Brad Olson, but he focuses on niche topics, like Antarctica and stuff like that. He's a very interesting guy, very charismatic. Um, there's a few other smaller publishing houses, but the lineup I've got now with Mae Brussel, Jordan Maxwell, Alan Watt, the Blackbird Talmud, it's a very impressive lineup I've got now. And soon to be released, Mark Passio, A Light in the Darkness. And as I said, they're fun to work on. So when I did Temple Whores and Noahide Law, I was, in a sense, foreshadowing this day that we're in now. And I was also counseling people who engaged my material, especially in book format, right? Because those books carry a tremendous weight of energy. There's a tremendous transference of energy in those books. They're not just words on paper. It's the way things are said, in The Devil in Us. It's the way things are said in The Light of Darkness. It's the way the story's told. It leaves an indelible mark on your psyche, like a cattle brand almost. And you have to deal with that. But as I said, it's an inoculation against a deadly, deadly spiritual disease. A black star is the term I used, right? I've had so many ways of describing these people over the months and years. So now the moment is upon us. And let's reflect on some of the things we've learned. Bill Gates allegedly gave his wife an STD that he caught off some Russian girl that Jeffrey Epstein provided. There was a piece in there about George. I mean, some things I don't even feel comfortable repeating out loud, even though they're in the public domain. I'm not sure if there's a necessity for it. Perhaps. There's a story about George Bush Sr. Medically cutting the cap off of a young boy's head while he was alive. I suppose they can give local anesthetics and stuff like that. But what I'm not trying to give gory details or shock you. I'm trying to explain the consciousness of the cult. Okay? Every spiritual organization has a consciousness, a collective consciousness that goes from the acolyte to the principal, whether it be a lay Tibetan Buddhist in Toronto all the way up to the Dalai Lama. And it's the same thing in this negative spirituality. So apparently George Bush Sr. cut the head off of a boy and ate it and started eating his brain. And the child was completely alive and watching the whole thing in a mirror. He could see his brain being eaten. And I suppose this is part of adrenochrome fermentation. I guess I would call it fermentation. I can't think of another word. To make the adrenochrome richer, the terror, the horror of it. I think we can all fairly well assume that the alleged video on Anthony Weiner's laptop circa 2015, 2016 in New York is probably true as well. And that one featured Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton terrorizing a 9-year-old girl, surgically removing her face, the skin, and then holding it up to show to her. And so what do we make of this? Well, as I've been saying since the beginning of this journey we're on, we're not here alone as human beings. There's good human beings, there's bad human beings. I've lived on this mountain with two relatively infamous narco traffickers, both of them mass murderers. They're normal people. Their murder takes place in the course of business. It's greed, it's fear of going to jail, it's control of the tribe, the gangs that move the drugs. The violence in those communities is not religious, it's necessary to maintain order. Okay? Now, how the lords of karma, the forces of life review and judgment, I wouldn't say judgment, but life review. You see, on the other side, there's no real judgment. There's this moment you hit where something judges you and you go to heaven and hell. It doesn't exist. What happens is all of the layers of love blockage you've packed onto yourself through trauma, defensiveness, ego, forms your personality, and in your head you think everything you're doing is right for the 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years you're on this planet. But if you don't do any spiritual work like fasting or prayer would work in this regard too, or meditation to sort of break those layers of density that are blocking the light of God from you, then what happens is when you release the body, those layers get released, and the you that goes to the other side is suddenly 5-year-old you that knew nothing but love. And then you look back on your life and you go, oh shit. Okay? And you get it. And then generally people ask for another chance. Can I have another chance? I really understand it now. I don't know how I lost my way down there. There's nothing else to do down here but lose your way unless you commit to daily, serious spiritual practice. Okay? The people who appear to be living normal lives, making a good salary, they can pretend to be good and they can pretend to be non-criminal just because they've never been put in the same situation as the poor people. It's a pretense. They're not more advanced. They're not more spiritually evolved. They just came into this incarnation with a different karma. Okay? The only way to break through it is to commit to spiritual practice and spiritual discipline. And that practice and discipline can be a code. Doesn't have to be, the way I do it, which is a couple or more hours of deep, deep meditation a day. Doesn't have to be like that. It works for me. But you could if you took up a religion, if you just took up everything Christ says to do in the Gospels and you didn't break the rules, you truly didn't stop, you would get it too. You would break through all of the layers around you. And that's what I call a behavioral path. So you commit to a course of behavior. You commit to a set of rules. This is the principle of Torah Judaism too, that if you live these rules, the illumination will come to you. And it's true. It will. There's many ways to raise your consciousness and to bring yourself in proximity to grace, which is the essence of the Creator shining on your life. Many ways to do it. I just talk about the way that's worked for me. And for me, it was meditation. But that doesn't mean there haven't been extremely illuminated Christians, Jews, not necessarily rabbis, but just Jews who live the code and learn to love unconditionally. And then if you make the Sufi Sheikh used to say to me, and I know he's a bad example because I ended up getting attacked after I left the Durga. That was some pretty heavy stuff too. That was some deep, dark Islamic shit I was dealing with. But I always come out unfazed. I don't know what it is. I'm like a pit bull in life. Like you knock me around, I just come out unfazed. Especially with this spiritual stuff, I'm starting to wonder if I'm immune to it. You know. So immune, or I'm living what I would call a highly protected life, meaning to do whatever I'm here to do, I required a certain level of protection around me. And it's always been there for me. Always been there for me. And I don't know what I did to deserve it. You know, I know it's not luck, but I do a lot of stuff. I mean, I put my heart in the game, you know. I write these books, I try to help people. I do a kind of journalism nobody else can really do. Well, there's a few people, you know, the dark journalists and stuff like that, but I like to think I have more heart. So what the hell was I talking about again? I always lose my way, you know? I start rambling and I mean, who cares? It's all fun, right? But we're talking about this time we're living in, and we're talking about the disclosure of this information, and we're talking about what Brent asked me and what Pipsqueaker asked me. And so the answer I gave in Temple Whores and Noahide law was the spiritual principle of judgment. Okay? One of the things I've learned through my years of practice and study is a fuller definition of what free will means. Now, some people argue we don't have free will, and it's a plausible argument. I could probably make it myself. But you see, the thing about living down here on this physical dimension is everything is simultaneously true and untrue. So you could make a fantastic case that we don't have free will, and you could make a fantastic case that we do have free will. And at the end of the day, nobody really understands it. But we do get to make certain decisions. So we don't have any free will in the disclosure of this horrible information. We're here now. It's 2026. We're incarnate. We're in body on planet Earth. And it's been revealed that there are these horrible, horrible people, what a lot of people are starting to call Jewish supremacists, which I've been talking about for years, going back to my radio days. I got kicked off of radio stations for talking about this stuff. But it's journalism and it's true. The only difference in this journalism is you can't really corroborate it the way you can embezzlement or fraud or all of the other stuff that is legally and lawfully provable. It's really speculative because a lot of it is multidimensional. How could I prove that black magic is being used routinely, daily, all over the world by aspects and sects of this cult? To change reality, to alter the timeline, to gain favor, to achieve a goal, to eradicate an enemy. How do I prove that? I can't. I can only sit here, look you in the eyes, and say, it's going on. You do with that what you will. You want to know how to prove it to yourself? Ask God, whatever you conceive God to be. Say, hey, I'm listening to this guy, Bruce McDonald, God. Make a little prayer of it. He's telling me that this stuff is going on. Can you help me understand it and prove to me whether it's real or not? And if you're sincere, you'll get your answer. It may take a bit of time, The creator works at his own schedule, but in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 3 months, you'll get the answer. Something will pop into your timeline. You'll notice it and you'll go, oh my God, that's it. That's the answer. Bruce was telling the truth. And this is how the truth spreads. It has to be a spiritual awakening. And because the nature of the material is spiritual, and in this sense, when I use the word spiritual, it really should be psychic. But what I mean when I say spiritual is non-physical, taking place in the collective reality of consciousness, what they called in the Latin the spiritus mundi, okay, spirit of the world, collective consciousness, because we all share consciousness, believe it or not. And you'll get your answer. So I explain the principle of judgment in Temple Hors and Noahide law. And the way the creator, which is layers of energy fields back to its finest form, in its finest form, it has no characteristics. There's no vibration, there's no sound, there's no nothing. Okay? But you got to make some coffee. Thank you, son.
That's convenient.
I'm podcasting. Uh. And so, you got to make some inquiries on your own. And you got to be a serious person. You don't have to be perfect. I mean, I'm here, I'm chomping on my cigars, I'm drinking 2 gallons of coffee a day. But and you can still work with the creator in an imperfect state. I mean, the myth of the perfect human being is just that, a myth. I don't care who, you know, this master of this path or Jesus or Muhammad, they're teachers. But at the end of the day, they're human beings. They're having a human incarnation. They're just having much more access to higher level knowledge and they share it with humanity. The myth of the perfect human being and the worship of human beings is a negative human habit. So don't be too hard on yourself. Now, if you're fucked up all the time, drinking every day or getting high every day, it's going to be very difficult to form any kind of meaningful spiritual connection with the creator. I'll tell you that straight up. So you got to clean yourself up a little bit. You can't have victim consciousness. You can't blame people. You have to be just living as a balanced, serious, individuated consciousness in a body that truly wants to know what life is going on, what's going on in life, what's the purpose of it, what am I supposed to learn. And anybody, and I mean anybody, will have the suitable path that will help them put in front of them. It might not be my path. It could be a religion. It could be the Baptist church. But if that works for you, that works for you. There's nothing wrong with it. Now, some of the churches, you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to get into a whole diatribe here, but you can make some mistakes in choosing a church for sure. I definitely wouldn't go with Mormons. I definitely wouldn't go with Jehovah's Witnesses. I would stay away from all large churches, like, especially the Protestant denominations. No offense to Protestants, okay? But the Christian church never should have split, okay? Yeah, the Vatican was abusing its power and had become drunk on power, but it would have been better had we corrected that without splitting it. But the diaspora Jews in Europe saw the opportunity and they took it. Created a faux revelation, a faux reformation, a faux enlightenment, which was really just a segue from the tyranny of the Vatican to the tyranny of the Sanhedrin. And now it's all coming to light. Okay? So, in this energetic structure we live in, when you judge somebody, you're actually, the way spirit hears it is, I want that experience. Okay? So, if you see people like doing this horrible, horrible shit, like Epstein and the people the darker characters who associated with them, like, and I've said on my podcast, It was Bob Wiegand who told me first that probably the darkest figure from behind the curtain ever to step out from behind the curtain and take a public role in leadership in this invisible hierarchy, probably one of the darkest figures ever was George Bush Sr. He was a demon in flesh. Okay? A demon in flesh. Merciless. You guys know the first Iraq War story, right? In '92, I think was the first one. Um, something like 100,000 soldiers had surrendered or something like that. They didn't want to fight. They threw up the white flag, and Bush had these machines over there in the desert, like kind of like bulldozers, but more powerful. He buried them all alive, even after they surrendered. Right? So he's a very dark character. Very, very dark character. The Clintons are very dark. Hillary is part of, I don't know if I should specifically name the satanic clan she belongs to. That might be a bit risky, but yeah, she's way up the pole. Everything you're hearing about Hillary is true, and whatever's made it out into the public space behind the curtain, it's 10 times worse. Okay? But after you have the inoculation, it doesn't scare you anymore. It doesn't even disturb you. It's just banal. It's pathetic. So the proper response to these people is pity. I mean, if you have love in your heart, if you have a connection with the divine, your response to what these people are, the correct spiritual response is pity, right? They're pitiful people, pitiful human beings. They may look powerful in the incarnation they live and the incarnation we share with them, meaning we live at the same time they live. But in the grander scheme of things, which is this sewing needle of incarnations, they're pathetic. Pathetic. I've been that pathetic in my soul record, which is why I don't really judge. There, but by the grace of God, go I. So that's the way to see them, is pathetic. But if you can't do that, and you judge them, spiritually, energetically, you actually give them the right to transfer their karmic liability to you. You're saying you want it. It's like walking up to someone with $1 million debt at a bank and saying, I want your debt. Just pass it over to me. Whatever you bought with that $1 million you borrowed and you now have to pay back to the bank, you keep that, but I'll take the debt. That's what it is. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons intelligent forces that work with the public consciousness in a benign way sometimes caution the release of information. You see, there are reasons that the public should not be told everything, because most times the public will create more chaos with the information. So why did the White House release this information? I think it was an opportune time to release it. I think because they're planning to attack Iran, and shit's going to get so hairy in the near future. Again, it's this layer thing I was talking about yesterday. Now, if something like this, what we've all learned, was dropped on the human race in 1972, there would be books and movies and television shows and documentaries written about it. It would be bigger than the Holocaust. By the way, what these people are doing, in my opinion, is bigger than the Holocaust. And let's be honest, let's not pull any punches here. Most of them are Jewish. Okay? Not all, but the inner core is Jewish, and that comes completely through in the emails that have been exposed. And the only remaining question is, does this represent Judaism? No, it doesn't. Okay? Now, we could say to ourselves, perhaps, that the non-participating Jews would know more than Gentiles that this thing was going on in the Jewish world. They'd know. It would be impossible to be a Jew in Brooklyn and not know that those Chabad Lubavitchers are raping boys. Okay? If you don't know this, I'm not saying anything that's a rumor. This is known. Okay? So the Jewish-owned newspapers enjoyed defrocking and humiliating the Catholic Church all through the 90s and the 2000s, and culminating in that movie with the Boston Spectator called, the movie was called Spotlight, which was the name of the paper. Can you pour me a cup? Thanks, son. You want to say hello to the unwashed masses?
God bless you if you live in the city.
That's good, thank you. And, you know, and the Catholic Church got dragged through the mud through it for a couple decades, and justifiably so. They're raping boys. But what nobody knew is that this is completely normal in a lot of the Orthodox Jewish communities. Okay? And it would be impossible to be moving around synagogues and to be in the Jewish community in New York and not know this was going on. Okay? So let's talk about this so-called white race. And really, when they say white race, they mean Christians. You know, when times are good and everything's going well, the Jews will call themselves white people. Now they don't call themselves white people. We're white people. So when times are good and everything's going well, who rocks the boat? You have to have a tremendous conscience to stand up and say something, right? And let's be honest. I mean, white Christians have habitually done this. Yes, um, slavery happened in the United States, a combination of factors. Dutch merchant marines bringing the blacks from Africa, other black tribes selling their own people, other black people to the Dutch, the Portuguese. Many of those ships were owned by Jewish merchants. But when slavery was finally broken, it was like a moral civil war in the white world. Okay? To the best of my knowledge, we're the only people on the planet that do this. That will risk our safety, our security, our stability, our economy, and everything to stand up and say, hey, this isn't right. And that's what made us a great culture. Okay? And that's different than judgment, by the way. You have to participate in stopping something if you're aware of it. The Catholics have a term for that. They call it a sin of omission, the failure to do something when you should have done it. Sin of commission is doing something that's sinful. Adultery, for example. You commission that sin. Your spirit, your impulse, your desire commissions the sin. You do it. The action is recorded. You sinned. A sin of omission is where something comes across your field of awareness and you should have a moral reaction and you should do something and you don't. That's a sin of omission. So you can create karma for failing to do things. And in this regard, our Jewish brothers and sisters have been a stone cold mafia. And it's all of them. The liberal Jews, the Reformed Jews, the Hasidim, the Chabad Lubavitch, all of them. There's a code of omerta in that culture that makes the Sicilians look like loose lips. And that's part of how they got away with this for so long. And whether you realize it or not, the reason this is all coming out now is because of Trump. Okay? So we again have to rethink what he's doing. Because at the same time, he's sending another $6 billion to Israel for defense. So I think Trump has figured out what we're all starting to figure out. There are good Jews and there are bad Jews. So you can't wipe them out completely and say it's all them. And when you think about it a little bit, I mean, if you were born Jewish and you knew that there was this latent anti Semitism in the Gentile world, would you want to add fuel to the fire by exposing your people to have serious moral failings like raping boys anally? I don't know how else you would rape a boy, but I feel it necessary to say that. So I understand the dilemma for the Jewish people. I get it. But at the same time, a horror has been perpetrated mainly in America, but extending into Europe, the Middle East, all over. Okay? A horror has been practiced here that it has to be addressed. It has to be brought fully to light. I mean, it's ironic, don't you think? I mean, here we are 80 years after World War II, and Russell Crowe just starred in Nuremberg. We're having that Holocaust jammed down our throat again. And a multi-decade operation of human trafficking, and probably, I mean, I'm only speculating here. I think, but this whole operation is much deeper than we think. It's genetic research. It may involve cloning, all creating human babies outside of a womb, stealing the eggs from women. Like there's all kinds of wacky shit under the surface of this stuff. And in my opinion, it's darker than the Holocaust. Well, we can't talk about it, but we can go to the cinema, spend $16 and watch Nuremberg and feel guilty. I'm not going to overdo the I told you so moment here with the Epstein release. I'll leave that to Candace Owens. But it does feel pretty good. Now, what happens next? I don't know. But I would not be so quick to judge people or to get angry or anything like that. I would go about my life peacefully. I would try to extend love to anybody who's been hurt by this, even emotionally, secondhand, just by hearing about it. This has got to be some of the most traumatic shit ever to come out, you know? And here we are. And I thought it would never come out. I thought I was crazy to publish The Light of Darkness. Not crazy, but I thought I'd look like an idiot for the rest of my life. It's amazing how, in the vicissitudes of life, you go from zero to hero in a snap of the fingers. Amazing. But I believe at the core of this Jewish culture is a deeply religious, deeply spiritual people that can add their light to humanity. And I think there's a third party force involved here that is very interested in seeing the Jews destroyed. I do. I don't know what that third party might be. Now, how does this affect everything that's going on? Are they going to get their temple now? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of people that really want to help them do that now, right? I'll tell you another thing that's very interesting to watch is the American Mossad associated public voices like Ben Shapiro trying to massage this. And this is unmassageable. There is no Dershowitzing your way out of this. Best, most silver tongued, devilishly spoken Jewish lawyer in the world cannot talk his way out of this. Okay? And nor can the ancillary. And I should stop saying Jewish. I'm breaking my own rules here. It's really a Luciferian cult that overlaps a number of religions, centered on a misuse of the Kabbalah and the attempt to spiritualize the ego, to make yourself super powerful rather than surrendering to God. And so there's a lot of Masons involved in this, you know. But make no mistake about it, these people are all initiated. These structures are formal, okay? Hillary Clinton is initiated. I don't know about Bill. I think Bill's just a hedonist, just a straight up pleasure seeker. But he's probably a part of it too. I mean, there's rumors out there that he's a Rockefeller bastard. That's another thing that came out too in the emails. Isn't that interesting? Jeffrey Epstein speaking to, I can't remember who he was speaking to. He says, I represent the Rothschilds, right? I mean, to just say that, you'd have to be an idiot to put that down in an email. But, he did. Knowing what we know now, and now that it's all been made public, the question becomes what's going to be done about it? And this is a very interesting question. And you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of an Illuminati whistleblower from about 15 years ago by the name or moniker, because it wasn't her real name, by the moniker of Svali, Svali. And she was saying as early as the late 90s that there was going to come a time in the early 21st century where the Illuminati would announce itself to the world. So if the disclosure of these documents don't involve any arrests, any civil seizures of assets and bank accounts, I mean, we should, Trump is like, are you going to leave the oil with the Venezuelan people? Hell no, it's ours now. Well, how about their money, Donald? There's got to be trillions there. You could probably pay back like maybe $5 or $10 trillion on the national debt. Why don't you seize all their funds? Crimes against humanity. Put them in jail and strip them of all their funds. There you go. If you want to be a cowboy, but I doubt Donald Trump's going to do that. And what does that mean? How do we interpret that? Well, I'll tell you how I interpret it. This is the announcement that they're real and they exist. And they've done it sideways, like they do everything sideways. We've been all over this till I'm blue in the face on the Talamanca Review. How movies and books and a lot of the podcasters coming out now, it's revelation of the method. And the person doing the podcast doesn't even have to know they're a part of it. They just get set up and some people invest some money into them. The algorithms fake their numbers. They get great guests, and within a year, they're a big time podcaster. Danny Jones, Julian Doherty. Do these guys seem exceptionally intelligent to you? They don't seem exceptionally intelligent to me. Then why are all the heretofore silent whistleblowers in NASA and various other organizations going on these podcasts? Who is directing them to go to these podcasts? It's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same disclosure. Okay? About 80 or 90% of the UFO stuff going on now and all the rhetoric and all of the highly cultivated narratives about extraterrestrials are all folded into this Illuminati agenda as well. They're either demonic forces impersonating extraterrestrials or they're legitimate negative extraterrestrials, as negative or more negative than the demons that have been in the human experience since the beginning of man. Both exist. So I tell people, don't go looking for extraterrestrials. Don't do this close encounters of the fifth kind, CE5. Stay away from Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer's wife's an Orthodox Jew. Okay. You ever notice how none of these Chabad rabbis who are doing YouTubes talk about UFOs? The Kabbalah of UFOs? I mentioned this before. There's a reason they don't talk about it because they know what those things are. They're fourth dimensional entities that were originally contacted through ritual and through the evolution of technology and technological ritual. They're now able to fully manifest in our physical reality. So we're literally at the point in our history where we're bringing things into this reality from other realities. And one other caveat, when you go back to the original, one of the original baseline stories of the alternative media, Montauk in Long Island, New York, by the sea, a lot more has come out about that stuff too. Press, for instance, one of the architects of that system and the utility of the chair and the psychic powers. And by the way, Stranger Things is a soft telling of the Montauk. Um, Stranger Things is soft satanic disclosure all the way through. Hellfire Club, look up the Hellfire Club. Okay? Just Google the Hellfire Club after this podcast. But what they realized was that human beings could physically manifest things through their psyche. And one of the ways they would amplify the psychic energy of people was to rape prepubescent boys. Again, there is no such thing as a minor attracted individual. This is a cult ritual sex. It's not the same thing as getting a hooker, getting a blowjob, or having a fantasy lived out for you on a weekend in Vegas. It's not the same thing. Okay? All of this pedophilia stuff is ritualistic and it's energy harvesting. You're stealing a lot of the vital energy from the child and you're crippling them for life, spiritually crippling them. They may, in fact, become very rich and successful and climb the ladder in this satanic hierarchy. Okay? And they're fascinated with the explosion and utility of psychic power. And how many times have I talked about this on the Talamanca Review? The difference between psychic and spiritual, right? Who are you going to believe? Who has more right to talk about these things than me? I've been around some of the most powerful psychics on the planet. The guy I wrote a book with, Bob, John Edmonds, powerful psychics. Okay? Being psychic is no great treat. Generally you want to leave your psychic centers closed. But these Illuminati types, to them, God is this fully illuminated human being that can read people's minds, see the future, and all of these things. But what do you sacrifice when you live that way? You sacrifice love. You may be able to have the facsimile of a family because every need your wife or your children would want, you can pay for. Private schools, great vacations on March break, um, anything and you probably won't get a divorce, but there's no love there. I don't think there's any great love in the Biden family, you know? You think there's any great love in the Clinton family, right? It's amazing the people that have been caught up in this thing. And, I'll tell you something. I've said this before, and I realize I'm starting to repeat myself like an old man, but she never admitted it. But when my mother read The Light of Darkness, I knew intuitively that she was extremely offended by what I said about Mother Teresa. That Mother Teresa was a wicked fucking cunt and a child trafficker. That's all coming out now. Okay? That's all tied into the Epstein stuff, too. Everybody is starting to figure it out now. What are they going to do with this? Are we being allowed to figure this out, or are we just being shown it before they snuff us because it's a final humiliation ritual for the dumb human beings? Which at this point we can call the dumb goy. I don't think so. I think we have a fighting shot here. Which circles me all the way back to Brenton Pipsqueak's question. What do you do with this? Well, you continue to love. You don't allow it to destroy the flow of love in your life. your contentment, your being, your joy, your ability to share that joy with others, your wife, your husband, your children, your neighbors. That's what they want to do. Because the lower that love energy is, the more powerful they are, the more effective their manipulations and their magic is. The only real defense against it is love, the cultivation of love. I know that sounds facile. Sounds like an idiot, actually. I sound like an idiot. But you're just going to have to take my word for it. That's the only thing that can battle against these things. So we have a fighting chance. Nothing is over. Don't believe what the guy on the other side of the Talamanca Mountain says. Yes, we're coming to the end of a cycle and expression of time. The whole solar system, everything is a clock. We're going into a new vibrational frequency. You could say, in a sense, you could say the world we know is ending, but the world proper is not ending. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.